Human geography tries to explain why people live where they do. It includes the study of two distinct but related concepts. Population distribution is the pattern of human settlement, the spread of people across the earth. Representing it on a map highlights places that are crowded or sparsely settled or even empty. Population density is a measure of the average population per square mile or kilometer of an area, and it measures how crowded a place is. Understanding both population distribution and density helps people make important decisions on issues such as where to set the boundaries of an electoral district or where to develop new housing. These are among the many issues influenced by the number, distribution, and density of current and projected population. Humans live on just a small percentage of the planet. The world contains 7 times as many people as it did 2 centuries ago. Population density has increased significantly. However, population distribution has not. The vast majority of growth has been in areas already settled. For example, eastern China was one of the most populated parts of the world in 1800, and it still is today. So why have people chosen to live in such crowded places? People want to live in places where they can survive with relative ease and comfort, places where they can raise or obtain food and live in moderate climates. Even when there were only 1 billion people on Earth, they were dispersed throughout such desirable lands. As population increased, the amount of suitable land stayed about the same, so people chose to live in greater densities on that same land. Survival for the earliest humans depended on food, water, and shelter. Thus, these hunter-gatherers settled where these features were most readily available. Similarly, people today have the same basic needs, which helps explain why the population distribution has remained so similar over time. Most people live in the mid-latitudes, the regions between 30 degrees north and 60 degrees north, and between 30 degrees south and 60 degrees south. These areas have more moderate climates and better soils than do regions at higher or lower latitudes. This pattern is particularly noticeable in the northern hemisphere because it includes more land than the southern hemisphere. Most people live in low-lying areas rather than high in mountains. Low-lying areas typically have better soils for raising crops than do upland or high-altitude areas. In addition, these areas are often close to oceans, which facilitate transportation, provide a source of food, and have a moderating effect on temperature. Oceans keep the land warmer in the winter and cooler in the summer. Most people live near lakes or rivers. People need fresh water to drink, and they can use it for irrigation, transportation, and to provide food. People also desire natural resources, such as forest products and minerals, and these can influence where people live. In places where humans first settled, people did so because a place's natural features attracted them. However, then the people themselves became an attraction. Newcomers moved in for safety, or to find a job, or to be with friends or relatives. And the populations and densities of urban areas have continued to grow, often to extreme levels. Where people decide to place transportation networks also has a significant impact on population distribution. People prefer to live close to trade routes. Roads, train lines, and rivers often produce a linear settlement pattern in which houses and communities stretch out in a line. Political decisions sometimes bring clusters of populations to isolated locations where physical attributes would not normally attract settlement. For example, a Canadian military base named Alert is the most northerly community in the world. It was situated where it was because it was close to what was the Soviet Union, and it allowed the Canadian military to monitor possibly hostile Soviet military activities. Cultural and political situations often result in new distributions of particular groups of people. Religious groups such as the Amish and the Mormons, who were persecuted for their beliefs, resettled thousands of miles from their homelands to protect themselves and preserve their beliefs. Population density measures the average number of people in an area. It is calculated by comparing the area's population to its size, and it's usually expressed in the number of people per square mile or square kilometer. And demographers actually study 3 different types of population density. The most commonly used population density is the arithmetic population density, which is calculated by dividing a region's population by its total area. In July 2015, the United States had a population of approximately 321,368,864 people in a total area of 3,841,999 square miles. So its arithmetic population density was 83.6 people per square mile. But arithmetic density says little about population distribution. Population density is simply an average number of people in an overall area. It does not indicate where in the area people live. Another measure is physiological population density, which is calculated by dividing population by the amount of arable land, or land suitable for growing crops. For example, in a recent year, the physiological density for Egypt, with 2.8% arable land, was 8,078 square miles compared to an arithmetic density of 226 per square mile. Such a large difference between the arithmetic and physiological densities indicates that a small percentage of a region's land is capable of growing crops. Egypt's high physiological density suggests there's a need for greater crop yields or for other food sources. The physiological population density is a much more useful measure than the arithmetic density when trying to determine a region's carrying capacity. And a carrying capacity is the population that a country can support without significant environmental deterioration. A country with a high physiological density indicates that it needs high crop yields, but higher crop yields are not always possible. Many regions rely on imported food. Egypt and Japan both have physiological densities that are greater than 8,000 people per square mile of arable land. In both countries, growing enough food to feed everyone is not practical with current technology. Both supplement crops through the fishing industry and with imported food. Paying for imported food is easier for a developed country such as Japan than it is for a less developed country such as Egypt. Countries with high physiological densities face extra challenges feeding their population. The third type of population density, agricultural population density, compares the number of farmers to the area of arable land. This value gives an indication of the efficiency of the region's farmers. Developed countries have lower agricultural densities because farmers have resources to use technology to produce large quantities of food with few workers. The agricultural densities in less developed countries are higher because farmers often cannot afford modern technology, so they depend upon more labor. As a result, they are not able to produce as much food per farm worker. For example, let's compare all three types of population density for Bangladesh and the Netherlands. Both have high arithmetic densities. Bangladesh had 2,914 people per square mile, and for the Netherlands, it was 1,044 people per square mile. Both also have high physiological densities, with Bangladesh at 4,938 people per square mile, and the Netherlands at 3,505 people per square mile. Yet the country's agricultural densities were drastically different, as might be expected because of their different levels of economic development. The more economically developed Netherlands had a low agricultural density of 31 farmers per square mile, indicating that Dutch farmers could afford technology and produce food more efficiently than farmers in Bangladesh, which had an agricultural population density of 431 farmers per square mile. Density also varies by time of year. Warm weather states such as Arizona and Florida become more dense each winter as snowbirds from northern states flee the cold weather. Time of day also influences population density. About 1.5 million people reside in the New York City borough of Manhattan. But each weekday when commuters enter the city to work, the population rises to about 3 million. Such a variation is a challenge for Manhattan, which provides water, sewer, fire protection, and other services for 3 million people, even though most return home elsewhere. The distribution of a region's population and its density reflect choices people make. These choices in turn reflect their values, such as whether they prefer rural or urban areas. Most economic decisions are based at least partly on population distribution and density. Businesses are more likely to earn profits when they are near a large customer base. For manufacturing plants, being close to a large labor force is important. Towns and cities have large concentrated populations that provide customers and workers for businesses, so that's where most businesses locate. Rulings by the Supreme Court require state legislatures to create electoral districts of reasonably equal population sizes, so each representative serves approximately the same number of people. Since population distribution and densities continually change, legislators have to adjust boundaries every 10 years to maintain similar numbers of voters per district. Because urban areas are continuing to increase in population and the population of rural areas is usually shrinking, these redistricting situations usually result in physically smaller urban districts and larger rural districts. The population characteristics of a region can also affect the number of government and private services and the location of these services. Facilities such as schools, police stations, fire stations, social assistance offices, and hospitals are usually positioned close to concentrations of population. Since towns and cities have greater populations and more concentrated populations than rural areas, these urban areas have many more such facilities much closer together than in rural areas. Whether a region experiences overpopulation, which is having more people than it can support, is partially dependent on its population distribution and density. Another factor is the region's carrying capacity, or the number of people it can support without damaging the environment. The higher the population density, usually the greater the strain on the environment. A region with good soil, climate, and other resources might support many people. Another with less favorable attributes will be unable to support as many people. Cities could be built on land with low carrying capacity, such as where the soil is not ideal for farming. However, for historical reasons, many are located on land with the greatest carrying capacity. Towns and cities started to grow on land that could support a large population, and they have remained there. In addition to agriculture, many other aspects of the environment are affected as population density increases. High population density can result in environmental problems such as pollution or depletion of resources. Because of factors such as sewage and industrial waste, many lakes and rivers no longer provide drinkable water. In some areas, water must be purified or piped in from hundreds of miles away. When people want to live in a particular region, from a country to a neighborhood, they can drive up the population density. They can live in high-density housing units rather than single-family homes. Since many people enjoy living in the centers of big cities, these neighborhoods usually feature apartment and condominium buildings that house many households. In Chicago, the population of the central part of downtown, known as the Loop, is about 21,000 people per square mile, more than double what it is for many neighborhoods. Providing services such as sewer, water, snow plowing, and policing is more cost-effective in high-density areas. The cost of installing a mile of sewer pipe is mostly based on the labor of digging up the land and connecting the pipe. Whether it's a large pipe to serve tens of thousands of people in high-rise buildings or a small pipe to several dozen people in a single-family house is not that significant. However, high-density areas have challenges. For example, the contamination of the water supply for a downtown area can make thousands of people ill, and a disease that spreads through casual contact is much harder to manage in crowded settings. Similar problems in a rural or suburban area with lower population density, which would be much less severe. Identifying the composition of a region's population is crucial to understanding that region's past, present, and future. Population composition involves demographic characteristics such as language, religion, ethnicity, age, and sex. Frequently, members of a particular ethnic group cluster in particular regions. Group members might choose to live close together for cultural reasons. This is often true of immigrants or some religious groups. Or discrimination may limit the housing choices for members of a particular group. The most notable example of this is where the practices in many cities that limited the neighborhoods where African Americans could live. Many cities have neighborhoods named for the ethnic clusters, such as Little Italy or Chinatown. Recognizing ethnic clustering is important for political leaders. Some ethnic clusters have specific needs requiring special funding, such as funds to help preserve distinctive architecture or to provide English language training. There may also be distribution patterns related to age and sex. Some regions of a country may have younger or older average population than others. In 2013, Utah had the youngest average age in the United States at 29.9, while the oldest average age was in Maine at 43.5. This difference is so significant that it shapes public policy. Officials in Utah have a higher percentage of school-age children to provide for, and officials in Maine might be more concerned with the needs for services for seniors. Similar distinctive patterns and resulting issues also exist at the scale of cities and communities. Differences in the gender balance can result from wars, migrations, and government policies. And at the level of entire communities, mining towns and military training bases often have significantly more males than females. Within a city, a gender imbalance might appear if one neighborhood has a post-secondary institution offering courses that tend to attract mostly students of one gender.